You got your restraint? Hobble? Jesus Christ.
Thank you.
Not moving.
Mama! Mama!
Yeah.
Mama!
Yeah.
Mama!
One of the front pouches.
Mama!
On my right side bag.
Mama! Mama!
Get EMS code too.
You're the rest guy.
All right. All right. Oh my God.
So you go to jail.
I can't believe this. I can't believe this.
No problem.
I can't believe this. I can't believe this, man. Mama, I love you. Reese, I love you.
You got hobble?
Tell my kids I love them.
Grabbing it.
I'm dead.
Mine's in my side. It's listed. It's labeled. It says hobble. It's on the
I
top.
can't breathe for nothing, man. It's cold-blooded, man. Ah, ah,
You're doing a lot of
Mama, I love you. I can't do nothing.
Yeah, EMS is on their way.
My face is gone.
You guys can get out of the way.
Don't touch me.
Need this?
Let's go to 40th.
You want one of us to ride with?
Yeah.
Ride with?
Yeah, stay good.
I don't have my phone, so I'll be Baker.
Belt it down.
What's that?
Help get belted down.
Yep. Where are we going?
We're just going to be down the street.
Okay.
Welcome to Kenosha, Wisconsin.
The National Guard now on its way to Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Jacob Blake's family calling for prayers and an end to the unrest tonight.
An ensemble inextinguishable. Percussion. Pyro. Inferno. It's the strained American refrain. Jacob Blake was paralyzed. Two sides mobilized. Mom said it's no way to rationalize.
It doesn't reflect my son or my family.
Another town burnt to the ground.
We have a community today that is literally on fire.
American foes. A season of echoes. Where next? Welcome to Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Welcome to the Living Experiment in Nonviolence conversation this evening. So we're going to begin. Let me begin by saying welcome, good evening, shalom, and hotep, and thank you Brother David Hallman, for joining us here. We're very excited to be able to share this time with you. We're very much looking forward to doing this chat and learning more about your very important work. So why don't we go back to the beginning? Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were born, where you grew up, and we'll get to know you a little better. We'll start from there.
My name is David Hallman. I was born in Chicago, grew up in Racine, and lived in Kenosha for about 15 years. And somewhere around Labor Day of 2018, I moved to Milwaukee. I am the music director and founder of the Black String Triage Ensemble, which is a group of Black and Latinx string players, violin, viola, cello, upright bass, that go out and play in the immediate aftermath of tragic events. We have chosen to prioritize shootings, police brutality, occurrences, and play at car accidents.
Well, we learned that in the introductory video. And by the way, thank you for all the materials that you supplied to help us set up the edit for this program. I was very gracious of you and very appreciate it very much. But you had a previous life as a legislator. I think that has a lot to do with where we are now. You might want to tell us about that.
So in 2008, at the age of 23, I was elected to public office in Kenosha as a county official, as a county board supervisor, a position I held for 10 years until 2018, when I decided to basically resign from that role. There was a lot of things that happened in Kenosha that I think were breadcrumbs into forming the Black String Triage Ensemble. Seeing a street fight break out in my district because folks had hot tempers and really didn't have the emotional and mental space to process what was happening in real time in a healthy way, just led to folks fighting. Was able to help cool tempers, but the fact that folks operate in that fashion in the hood when stuff is tense is a concern. Kenosha had something called Keyed Up Kenosha, where they had pianos in downtown Kenosha where anybody could come and play them. And I just remember walking through, I said, they don't need this here. This is downtown. This is the party district. This is where Cheesapalooza is. My district is next door. My district's the hood. There's nothing like this where there's just music for people walking around through the inner city, and they need it.
To be human, to be like human beings. Well, I'm sure when you got to Milwaukee, you found that the community wasn't treated much differently here, but there were perhaps opportunities from Milwaukee being a larger area and room to stretch out your skills, which could have possibly played a role in things turning out the way they did.
Hi, my name is David Hallman and I need your help. Yesterday, a man walked up to me in a black suit with a nice haircut and offered me money. The problem is, I know that what he and his friends want is not in the best interest of you, your friends, your family, or your community. He's not interested in stopping the illegal foreclosures. He's not interested in making sure your kids can get a good education. And he is not interested in paying you a living wage. 3 weeks ago, I announced my candidacy for the Wisconsin State Assembly. And I don't want any election, especially mine, to be just about wealthy people. So I'm asking for your help. I'm asking for you and all of your friends to please send $1 to my campaign. With $1, I can continue fighting against the foreclosures that tear up our communities. With $1, I can advocate for lower college tuition. With $1, I can make sure that working families in Wisconsin making less than $50,000 a year that have kids see their taxes go down. So I'm asking you and all of your friends to please contribute. Don't make this just about the wealthy. I'm your candidate. I'm here for you. And I know you can step up to the plate. So for those of you who are wondering, that guy in the suit who offered me the money, I told him no thanks. I figured you've got this covered.
An unprecedented plan to reduce Milwaukee crime. Carol Meekins got an exclusive invitation to the first rehearsal of a group hoping the power of music can strike a chord of peace.
The late composer Leonard Bernstein once said, "This will be our reply to violence, to make music more intensely, more beautifully, more devotedly than ever before." The Black String Triage Ensemble is practicing in that same vein, hoping their strings serve as a salve for Milwaukee's troubled neighborhoods. At the group's first public rehearsal, an audience gathers at Ascension Lutheran Church on South Layton Boulevard, Sunday, April 28th.
Let's go from 31.
Founder and director David Holman plans to deploy these musicians to selected homicide scenes in Milwaukee.
What do you hope to accomplish?
Hope to move people from absolute despair and hopelessness to hope and possibility.
Holman believes the universal language of music can be a tool of change.
When you do music, you are always a warrior because you are always trying to communicate with the soul, whether that's your own or to reach someone else's to communicate a message. Anybody who's ever had to plan a funeral understands the importance of the favorite song of the deceased, whether that's Beethoven 5 or Led Zeppelin.
Concerts will feature music of black composers with themes of race or poverty.
Do you believe you might be able to affect a reduction in the homicide rate and the way people think through your music?
I think if we're creative and we're diligent, anything is possible.
Plato once said, "Music gives life to everything." Holman's dream is that harmonies will infuse a humanity in the streets and present a prelude to peace.
We're in this together, and everyone has something to contribute to this community to make a change, and this is the moment for all of us to step up.
It's beautiful. The Black String Triage Ensemble plans to start their concerts in Milwaukee's neighborhoods over the next few weeks.
As a dedicated student of history, I have personally enjoyed every single minute that we spent preparing for this discussion, because to me, you represent the true definition of a walking, talking encyclopedia, especially when it comes to the inspirational history of Black America's noble and dignified contributions to the American classical tradition. So I actually had my sister cracking up last night when I was telling her about you. I kept saying, the boy is a genius. And I really do believe that. For example, I was hoping that you would share the fascinating story you told me about the crucially critical role Coretta Scott King played in the early days of the Civil Rights Movement, before Martin Luther King Jr. became an international figure, a leading international figure.
So before Coretta met Martin, she was a student at the New England Conservatory of Music there in Boston, and she was studying voice as well as violin. And so, of course, when she met the Reverend Doctor, of course, he wasn't the Reverend Doctor quite yet at the time, she basically became a pastor's wife. But her first album, I want to say 1 or 2 albums that she had, they used her voice, her singing voice, and sold those albums to start money for the movement.
That's an incredibly important chapter in the history of this country. And even at my late age in life, I had no idea, and I'm sure most of the audience had no idea, that Dr. King's wife did play such a crucial role in the early stages of the movement. I just want to thank you for what you do. And not only are we asking for physical support, we're also asking for prayer, because we believe prayer, as the scripture says, effectual prayer worketh great good. So what we're going to do, we're finally going to close out this evening with a sequence of works from the ensemble. But there's a fascinating story that I never knew before we began to talk about the Frederick Douglass Funeral March. That's one of the numbers that will be featured in the closing sequence. Perhaps you might want to share.
So the Frederick Douglass Funeral March is a piece of music written by a man by the name of Nathaniel Clark Smith. He was a military officer, lived around the same time as Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. And he never met Frederick Douglass, but what we know about Nathaniel Clark Smith, in addition to military service, is that he also ran a number of newspapers after he got done with his military service, in addition to being a band leader, orchestra conductor. And so he certainly was, there's no record of him having met Frederick Douglass, but we know that being a military officer and Douglass having gone to Lincoln and advocating for Union colored soldiers to be paid the same as white soldiers, to which of course Lincoln said that would be problematic. Certainly Nathaniel Clark Smith had some feelings about Frederick Douglass, because Douglass was known for his oratory. And Nathaniel Clark Smith, being a printer, certainly would have been familiar with those speeches in terms of what Douglass had meant and had stood for and had advocated for. So I'm sure as a patriot, it probably must have cut Nathaniel Clark Smith quite deeply at the loss of Frederick Douglass. Now, Nathaniel Clark Smith is unusual because there isn't much about him. He is called the Melchizedek of jazz because he is the first person that we come across in American musical history that somehow trains the first generation of jazz musicians, but yet we know so little about him. We do know that Nathaniel Clark Smith was, it's said that he was only seen either in his concert dress, which was full tuxedo, or in his military dress, which, you know, in that time could be quite fantastic, just as a tuxedo could. And he was able to move freely between Black society and white society because Nathaniel provided music to various portions of the community. So he, upon the passage of Frederick Douglass, Nathaniel Clark Smith writes this piece. It was originally written for piano, but I've transcribed it note for note for string orchestra, which I think appropriately gives it much more of the emotional flavor that is intended.
I told y'all this boy was a genius. So we've learned so much in this time that we've spent with you. And it certainly didn't mean to call you a boy. You're a great man in every sense of the word.
No offense taken. I respect my elders. Not always when I should, but in this case.
Well, I think of you as I'm a man with 3 daughters and a grandson, and you represent to me everything I hope my grandson grows up to be. Conscious, learned person, making a positive contribution to society. There's nothing more fulfilling for a parent than to see a young person grow up and blossom and flourish.
I appreciate that, and I mean it's it's hard to take in because this works for people. Like the very first crime scene that we played, a man had been shot in the leg and taken to the hospital, and the woman came out of her house. Most of the musicians had packed up. I was still there. She had curlers in her hair and her bathrobe on. And she says, I'm the mother of the person who just got shot. And she told me what had happened. She said, I will sleep better tonight knowing that you are here. And then went in the house. We played a second crime scene, and it was interesting. Intersection of 2 streets. And just to the left, about 2 houses in, 3 houses in, was like 4 cars with the windows open, stereo blasting. And the high schools are just let out for the summer. So there's all these kids in the street twerking. And so we're setting up, and a lady just to the right of me, she had a few beverages to start her weekend. And she says, quiet, you'll wake the baby. And I just look over my shoulder and I'm like, I got 6 string players and there's 30 kids in the street twerking, and you're worried we'll wake the baby? All right, lady, all right. To make a long story short, when we got done playing at that scene, the woman was still on her porch, and she had an entirely different feeling about what we had done. She said, oh, you all really blessed me. I don't have any Sprite. I don't have any water. I wish I had something to offer you. I said, ma'am, that's not necessary. We're here for you. You know, we're not looking for Sprite. We're not looking for water. We're not looking for anyone to give us anything. We are there on the scene for folks in that community who have to take in that moment. Strangely enough, this has also been helpful for law enforcement. We had one sergeant that we'd seen one summer at an earlier crime scene. We showed up to another one, and he walks up to me and he says, well, first of all, I don't know what happened. I said, I don't need to know what happened. I teach kids in this community, and if it's something that's happened to one of them, that's the last thing I need to know before we play or conduct. Where do you want us to set up? And he says, well, you can set up over there in the grass. He said, you all did such an excellent job last time. It was helpful for my officers at the scene. Wow. He says, if you set up over there, he says, not only can we hear you across the street, but he said, you see over there, and he pointed up, and there were windows where people had the windows open because it was summer. They had their heads hanging out because it was hot and paying attention to what was going on outside. So he really wanted it to help permeate the environment. And then he spoiled it by warning us and saying that he might bring a dog through the grass to check for shell casings, which, you know, just not to spook the musicians, as if it doesn't matter what you play, if dogs coming through, whether you've been told or not before, you're going to be spooked. We've had journalists, TV journalists, who, you know, because they have to come to these scenes and interview people, and then come back a week later, and then come back 4 months later, 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later. They have to carry with them the story of what happened in terms of interviewing these people who are family and friends and loved ones. And so one in particular, she had like 12 seconds, she said, before she had to go on air. And she just could not center herself to get focused to tell the story. And so she said she focused in on our music, and it helped her be able to do her job. And that's when she looked at me and said, so who are you and what is this about? So it's been helpful for a range of people who have to deal with shootings, police brutality, these things that happen. And I'll be the first one to freely admit that if you're a dad and it's your son that just got shot and we show up to a scene, what we're doing probably isn't for you. so much, it's going to take a much longer arc of time for you to heal from what has happened. But for everybody else who has to live, be, and sometimes, as I say, drink in that space to interact, we shouldn't walk around with the collective thought and feeling that this is normal, that this is okay, that this has just happened, or with the sadness of, oh, this has happened again. We shouldn't become accustomed to it. There has to be something that still keeps the fire of our humanity burning.
And music filled that intersection of Holton and Center shortly after police cleared the scene this morning. David Hallman is part of the Black String Triage Ensemble. It's part of a group of Black or Latinx string musicians who play in the immediate aftermath of shootings or incidents involving police brutality. Hallman performed several songs in the River West neighborhood, trying to provide comfort to those who need it.
And I don't, like I think I said this before, like, I don't ask questions when we get to a scene. Okay. So I plan as though it's a funeral. I plan for the worst, but everything that we do in terms of music, from denial to acceptance to faith, we hope for the best. We hope for the best. And there are other situations. We do peacekeeping missions, the Black String Triage Ensemble does, with a sister orchestra called Legion of the Soul, who are non-Black, non-Latinx musicians. And in peacekeeping situations is when the government is called a curfew, usually because of police brutality, which just makes grieving people hurt more.
Sure.
And so we come and try to use the music to hold off violence from happening. We did this in Kenosha in the wake of the Jacob Blake shooting, and we stayed as long as we could until the tear gas became too much, and then left the scene. So we're using music really in both of those.
Tear gas.
Tear gas, yeah.
So you're playing music, and the law enforcement officials see you making this effort to calm things down, but yet somewhere in their decision-making process, the most intelligent thing they could think to do was disperse tear gas against the crowd.
So I'm glad that yes, and I'm glad that you've raised this, because in the case of Kenosha, I had been elected there and then had moved to Milwaukee, but I'd still known a number of people. So I managed to get a message to the mayor of Kenosha prior to us being there that night, and basically said that the Black String Triage Ensemble would be on site, and that we would play until we felt like we were done. And that after we left, he needed a plan for peace that, quote, did not involve white men with guns. Preferably no one with guns, but particularly white men with guns. And I say that in this case because Kenosha has a history of having skinheads and neo-Nazis in that area, and Antioch, and that the National Guard had been called in, and where I love my fellow Wisconsinites, we got some white folk in the National Guard who haven't been around this. They didn't see this in high school, and I'm not so sure that's who I want keeping the peace in a situation like that. It's when people of color, when we see these situations in terms of how we are handled by law enforcement, we don't look at it as being, oh, it's just that one. We all see ourselves. We see ourselves as part of a collective, that we are attached to that as a traumatic experience. And so instead of a local government or a state government or whoever it is in terms of governance, instead of saying we're going to put out grief counselors, we're going to put out artists, we're going to make sure we have our city alderperson and our county board people out there for dialogue about issues, about how, instead of making it a community session on grief and reflection and how we can do things better, they say lock yourself in your house and do nothing. And that just bottles up all that emotion and makes people feel worse. And so the whole point was to bring music to try to hold off violence from happening. I was able to get a message to the governor's office in the case of Kenosha as well, to say the Black String Triage Ensemble would be on site. Please don't shoot at us. And to ask them, could you escort us to the scene? And the reply that came back from the governor's office was, thank you for coming out. We're real glad you're going to be there, but no, we can't do any of that for you. Thank you and good luck. And it amazes me to this day. We know exactly from 1940, 1950, 1960, 1970, 1980, 1990, 2000, 2010, 2020. We know how painful the relationship is between law enforcement and people of color, and yet the plan is always to just deploy more law enforcement, and then people get mad with, oh, there's a riot and they destroyed this and attack. Like, it's just, we have to have a smarter plan for managing and for dealing with all of that, other than just sending in law enforcement. It's not healthy or helpful for anyone.
He handcuffed me real tight. As I said, he cut my circulation off. He went out of the room and stayed, I guess, for about an hour. And then came back and tried to talk to him, asked me what could I tell him, about the robbery. I told him I couldn't tell you anything about the robbery. I don't know nothing about what you're talking about. And he said then that, oh, you're going to play tough. So you will tell us before you leave here what we want to know. So I've been known to get out of people's what I want. He got real upset and said, you will talk, you black motherfucker. You said, I'll make you talk, kill you and him one. So I still don't understand. So he, in anger, he rushed to the typewriter and grabbed the plastic cover off there and just crammed it down over my head. And it's like he was a madman. And so a little officer helped him, because I was trying to get my arms out from behind the chair, but I couldn't do anything. And I passed out. And like I said, he gave me a breath of air, and I came to conscious. And you ready to talk? And I said, I don't have anything to tell you still. So he do it again. The third time, out of the third time, that's when I told him, I said, I'll tell you whatever you want to know, man. Just don't do this no more.
And so to really force that and drive that home, peacekeeping missions are necessary. Peacekeeping missions are necessary, and necessary on an integrated front. That's why it's the Black String Triage Ensemble and Legion of the Soul, not just triage by itself.
Great. It's got to come from the bottom up. You're a student of history. You know all the great movements in American history started at the bottom. And then the politicians had to run ahead of the crowd to try to get in front of it so they could take credit for it. But it'll be people like yourself who are forces for good that are going to bring about the final change and educate the people in terms of what needs to be done. So I just want to encourage you at every opportunity, and leave an open door invitation for you to come back. Consider this your home. Consider this a place where you can get your message out and teach the people. People need to know what you know. You have a wealth of knowledge that needs to be shared with the community. And I'm going to lay down right now that we need to have you back as soon as conveniently possible. We know you have a full-time job. We know you have work to do, and we're not on very often. But we want to build on this. We want this to be the beginning. We want to expand, and next time perhaps we'll go live, and that'll be interesting. So
yeah, so the Black String Triage Ensemble does have one open rehearsal a year. We don't do concerts, so we do an open rehearsal. Typically, our rehearsals are closed. They start in January. They go through May. The very last Sunday in May is our annual open rehearsal. This year, that will be Sunday, May 30th, 2021, in Washington Park here in Milwaukee at the Emil Blotz Temple of Music from 4 to 6 p.m. And we just basically play through everything that we're going to use throughout the duration of the summer. Because due to the weather, we're only operational June, July, and August. And that way folks can have a chance to hear and experience the music who live in places that we might otherwise not show up. I would absolutely love to come back and give a recap in September as far as what transpired over the course of the summer. Every time we go out and play, it's different. Every time we go out and play, it's different.
That would be great. Did you know that Washington Park used to be Milwaukee County Zoo?
I did. Did you know that Emil Blotz put up the Emil Blotz Temple of Music because he was inspired by the Grant Park Orchestra of Chicago and felt that Milwaukee should be able to have a place that it could come as a public park and experience, namely classical music, without really having to pay a dime?
Wow, I'm impressed. I'm always impressed. And I feel so blessed to have had this opportunity to spend this time with you. And I look forward to us talking again. And I'm very excited to see how the community is going to respond to this appeal. You have a compelling story. You have a vitally important service that fills a critically crucial need in the community. And I just want to thank you for everything that you do, and want you to keep us in our prayers as you will be in ours, and keep up the good work. God bless you, and God bless America.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All arranged according to the 5 stages of grief, from denial to acceptance, with the 6th stage of faith included at the end, because if we don't believe it's going to get better, we don't move on. I think it's going. We'll assume that's. Did I do that? I think I did that. All right.